Now let's bring in one of the best in the business, the one we've been leaning on throughout this whole pandemic, Dr. Deborah Birx, White House coronavirus response coordinator, who doesn't seem to need any rest, because I watched you last night outdoors, and I'm watching you on Sunday on every Sunday show, and you're back with us on Tuesday morning. I think I'm going to put you in for a raise. I'll supply the paperwork a little bit later, Dr. Birx. But let's talk about what's happening yesterday. It kind of surprised me with the testing, getting Walmart and CVS and others involved to ramp it up, because in the back of my mind is what you said on Sunday, that without any major innovations, we're not going to get testing where we want it to be in the not-too-distant future. Did you not anticipate the private sector getting involved in those announcements yesterday?
No, the private sector has been involved. It was the magnitude of involvement. I mean, I think we really understood that you've got to bring the test to the community. Whether it's drive-through, whether it's walk-through, the community has to feel like tests are available to them. So just having it at hospitals or clinics was not going to be enough. And so that part of this is critically important to expand community testing.
Yeah, Dr. Birx, you know, we've been talking a lot about statistics, and you have as well. I was reading in the New York Post, Scott Atlas from the Hoover Institute wrote an op-ed about looking at the numbers, and of the people who are designated COVID, absolutely COVID deaths investigated in New York, 99.2% had underlying issues. So if 99% had underlying issues, the chances of the average person, a healthy person, getting it are small. And one of the things that I have heard from my friends on Zoom and walking around the neighborhood is maybe the government overdid it in closing everything down to make sure that everybody was safe, when in fact you just had to protect a certain demographic.
No, I think that's an interesting idea. I think what we have been looking at very carefully is the explosive nature of this virus, and I think it's highly contagious. And so even in phase one, we've asked every governor, every public health official to ensure whether you're inside or outside to maintain social distancing when you're in a public place, and to have a mask if you can't, because it's really, really critical. When you look at the New York area, where they could get to 2% of the entire population infected and hospitalized or close to hospitalized or with serious illness. We know that there's mild symptoms, but I think what you really are getting to, does everyone know that they have an underlying condition? And do we know all the underlying conditions that are critical? And I think adding asthma was critical, but also hypertension, even mild hypertension. You know, a lot of Americans have that. And so I think the converse of that is how many Americans actually have early signs of early diabetes, early hypertension, asthma. A lot of Americans do. And so we had an obligation to protect all of Americans while we collected the data of how contagious this virus is, how rapidly it spread, right, and then how to really treat it when people get to the hospitals.
Yeah, we see some of these images of the beaches, like the ones in California, where people are not social distancing, fewer wearing masks. You see the boardwalks with tons of people. And I know some of these are families, and they've been together for a long time, and so they're okay. But not everyone is social distancing. And your recommendations, I think it was 2 days ago, you said we need to think about social distancing through the summer. What are your guidelines to the American people that are watching right now?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we've talked about, and even in phase one and phase two, we've asked people with pre-existing conditions and comorbidities to continue to shelter or shelter as much as they can. And that's part of social distancing. And then everybody who's in those households has to be scrupulous in their hygiene, in their protection, in their social distancing while they're out. And the reason this has become more and more important is we're beginning to understand more and more that there may be an inverse relationship for how severe the disease is and your age. So younger people could actually be infected and not know they are infected and unintentionally pass the virus on. And so that's why we need everyone to be responsible and everyone to take care.
Dr. Birx, how do you view these daily updates? Dr. Fauci's been quoted by someone saying they're grueling. They last for an hour and a half. You're obviously involved in a political situation when you're up there. It doesn't take much to see those questions. Do you ever wonder about the benefit of having them at the length that they are for you personally and for the public to be informed? Do you ever wonder if we're actually benefiting from them?
I think it's really important that the American people know the federal government is collecting data every day and doing everything they can to respond to this epidemic, and then passing on insights across the country. Each state is seeing something different and has a different best practice, and our job is to ensure that through the governor's call and through those press conferences, that press briefs, that we actually are able to communicate key new findings and new insights that governors have brought us, states have brought us, and certainly that we see in the data.
Can I just ask you real quick, would you like to change anything about those
actually
briefings?
Hearing what
Dr. Birx, would you like to change
Brian,
anything about those briefings?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Would you like to change anything about those briefings?
You know, I think I'm a PowerPoint kind of gal. I'm very data-driven. I really like to use that time to educate the American people. So, you know, if I've got a graph behind me, I'm extraordinarily happy. I think the American public, the more knowledge the American public has about this epidemic, where it is on a county-by-county dialogue is really critical. And the more communities know, the more they can protect themselves. And so I'm always happy when we can do graphics and talk to the American people.
Well, I started to say I enjoy seeing the briefings with the leaders at the end of the day to figure out what they've done. And it was good to see the CEOs of the testing companies and the big retailers yesterday talking about the national strategy. But Dr. Birx, going back to what Ainsley had talked about with you regarding social distancing, and particularly the idea of wearing a mask. We had a story about 20 minutes ago that apparently JetBlue is going to require people on the airplane, the passengers, to wear some sort of a face covering. And I'm just wondering, going forward, how much face covering are we going to see? I mean, my daughter was supposed to get married this Saturday, but they put off the wedding for 3 months. And that's right, Sally's watching somewhere. She's going to get married in August now. But going forward, you know, will people at the wedding be wearing face coverings because they'll be dancing? And things like that. Going to sporting events, will people be in stadium seats with a face covering? What do you think going forward America looks like?
Well, this is what we know about this virus. We know that talking, singing, certainly sneezing and coughing can pass the virus on to others. And because you can pass it when you're asymptomatic, people don't know that they're infected. And so if there's virus in the community, or you're gathering people from different areas of a state where there may be still residual virus and no virus, if everybody wears a face mask, then you're protecting the other person, because it's really having the asymptomatic individuals wearing masks. But since you don't know if you're one of those, really everyone needs to in those kind of social gathering situations, as long as there's virus still in the community.
Yeah, Dr. Birx, just to piggyback on what Brian was saying, you're very smart. You're up there every single day. We know you're not getting any sleep, and we thank you for what you're doing. We're sorry that sometimes politics does play a role in all of this, because I know you just want to get the facts out there, and your medical points are more important than the politics. You care about every single American, and we appreciate what you're doing. I want to ask you about the fall. What are your predictions for the fall? I know New York is different than certain parts of the country, but are you thinking that, I know that, as you said, weddings are going to be different. We might be wearing masks at weddings in the fall, but do you think schools will start back up? And how do you think this is going to change America going forward?
You know, it's a great question. Normally, Northern Hemisphere respiratory diseases move into the Southern Hemisphere during the summer because it's their fall. It will be very interesting to watch Australia, New Zealand, Southern Africa, and Chile and Argentina to see what happens with the virus in the summertime and what's happening to the virus here. So really, those two pieces together will really define how we do in the fall. Our job right now, and our job in the White House, to ensure that we are ready for anything that happens in the fall, whether it's testing, whether it's PPE, whether it's ventilators, whether it's a complete surveillance system that understands that we have to track for asymptomatics as well as symptomatic individuals. All of those pieces need to accelerate and expand to be ready for the fall.
All right, Dr. Birx, thanks so much. We'll see you today at 5.
Thank
Yep.
you.
We think, if there's a briefing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Take a nap.
All right.